Hello guys, it is Chris here from the Football League Hub, otherwise known as United Avenger, on my personal account that delivers Manchester United news and opinions and podcasts and you name it, all sorts of different things. Anyway, so today is a little bit different. So I'm going to talk about Itk'S as much as I can. And the reason I'm doing that is because over the last couple of years, on my accounts and outside of that, people have asked me about it. I've never said much about it, or I've kind of ignored what it is, what goes on with it, because firstly and foremost, stuff like that doesn't interest me, and trying to be professional with those kind of accounts is quite difficult. So, but I thought it was time because there's a lot of more accounts popping up and certain things are happening. So, you know, I'm going to say this nicely to a lot of people that follow IT accounts before I get into it. Quite a lot of you are quite clueless. And that's me being polite. I don't mean it in a disrespect. It's because of what you're looking for and the accounts and what you say sometimes. And some of the replies I see, and it makes it I will say this, it makes it incredibly difficult for a journalist, or myself included, to actually do my job in real life and to do the stuff that I do that I don't have to do on Twitter and my other social platforms, because I'm constantly having to look if it's true, if it's not, and those sort of things, because a lot of people ask me and I'm kind of very engaging towards my users. So it's just me I'm going to have to be harsh in this podcast because people need it. And, you know, there's a lot of things they don't see and they're quite clueless to it. And I want to just go through why Itk'S are extremely fake, okay? And it's a myth. Now, there are some accounts out there that are not Itk'S that are pretty credible. I'm not going to name the Itk'S because all of them are fake. So I'm not going to name anyone in particular, because I don't do that. And, you know, that's from a professional level, there's no point me doing that because, you know, there's just getting to squabble for no reason. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about Itk'S now. So primarily, what is an Itk'S? So according to Twitter, that Itk'S is someone that's got inside information to a club, whether it's direct or they've got their own particular sources, right? And quite often or not, these accounts get a lot of things right, or they're on point, the thing. So it makes a lot of people think actually they might be credible, right? The first thing I say to that and to you guys is that the things they report are already being reported or kind of obvious. So, for example, Donny van der Beek wanting to leave Manchester United, well, that's kind of obvious because he's not playing, but a lot of people report on that. Or Cristiano Ronaldo joining Manchester United, but that was pretty obvious as well because the Glazers and Ferguson would never have let that happen. So there's a lot of things that go on under the radar. And if you actually look deep into these accounts, they do send messages out where they slip up. And I'm going to talk to you about certain examples, but I'm not going to go into what that account is. You might know who it is. I can't help that. But that's what an Itk'S is. They're they get inside information from either directly from the club, which is laughable, but I'll talk to you about it in a minute, or they've got their own sources that have got inside information to the club. All right. So that's what an Itk'S is. The next thing I'm going to say is that if you look on Twitter or you look on other social platforms, Manchester United have the most Itk'S. I hate saying the name because it doesn't exist, but I'm going to tell it just for the benefit of this video. They have the most Itk'S more than Liverpool, Chelsea, or any other particular club. Now, there are some popping up more and more. You're probably going to see Newcastle United suddenly have loads of Itk'S because they'll be trending, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. So why do Manchester United have the most Itk'S, right? Well, the first thing is Manchester United is probably the biggest club socially on all the platforms where you're going to get the most likes, the most interactions. Now, some of these Itk'S will say, I don't care about followers, I don't care about likes, I don't care about retweets. They do. They're just saying it to say, oh, look at us, we're doing it. Well, what are you doing it for then? Because you don't get paid for your job. You're not getting paid for it. So why are you doing it? What are you delivering? What do you gain out of tweeting that on a day-to-day basis? So that makes sense. So yes, so they trend the most. Also, the club is in such a mess that it's easy to get a load of followers on, because people are looking for positive hope. They want to see something that's come out. They don't want to see the negative side of it, which again, that's up to them. That's their opinion, but it's absolute clueless mentality, because, you're looking at the wrong thing. All right. And that's the reason why is that Manchester United have so many of these ITKs. Okay, so why other clubs don't have so many ITKs? Or how come they don't have the same structure or framework that these ITKs claim? Why did they have, or how does Manchester United have so many millions of sources and not have leaks? So you got to look at it from that point of view, is that I think I've seen at least 30 to 40 ITKs in the last year. So that means they've probably got at least 40 or 50 sources, right? So surely then the club would be concerned about the amount of leaks coming out of the club because of all the sources. So it's false. There's none of that goes on. The club will only brief to the journalist or anyone directly who works with a journalist, or directly to agents and has players and agents around that. That's the only time that ever happens when it comes to briefing. The club doesn't need to go to an unknown source and say, hey, Zidane's coming or Ronaldo's signing. They don't have any benefit of doing that. There's no interaction for the club, which they extremely like. There is nothing there. So you need to wake up and smell the coffee, really. That isn't the case. It's just the fact that United is so poorly managed, operated, that people prey on what you're looking for online. So, the club doesn't have millions of sources. There's not millions of ITKs that suddenly have news that comes out. Right? I don't know why they do it, but they do it because either they're either kids, or it gives them some sort of platform to voice their own opinion. And we'll get onto that in a minute. But that's why Manchester United have it. Okay. The next thing is why did they mass followers so quickly? So there was one account in the last few days that's just suddenly jumped off from 3 to about 10K, I think. And then there's one that was last summer that went from 500 to 30K, right? Why did they get it so quickly? How can people be incredibly stupid and believe these accounts straight away? Well, let's look at it, right? Is that if I put a tweet out today and said Ollie was sacked, I would get about 4,000 followers in about 24 hours. If I went and said, Ollie will be sacked next week, right? But that's fake. That's not being transparent. That's not being clear, and that's not giving accurate news, right? But then what they do from that is they will start to say, well, I'm not the Glazers, or they'll go, he is going to get sacked. We know what's going to happen. We're just waiting to see what happens, right? Let me explain. If the manager's resigned, or he's been sacked, or manager's coming in, then there would be none of this nonsense from the club where they continually brief to journalists that he's either been backed or will have something that comes out already, because they don't take a week or two. Like you can't, like me, I can predict if there's a second coming or third coming in the 4 months' time. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, right? But you can predict in 4 months' time that something's going to happen. So these ITK accounts say, oh, Zidane will be here in 3 months' time. They're not even talking. There's no official talks. So how do you know that? Zidane's camp's not going to tell 50 or 60 different sources that he's talking to Manchester United, because Man United would want to keep it quiet. So how do you know 3 or 4 months down the line? It's just utter nonsense that I hear constantly on Twitter from there, right? And all the other journalists, including myself, are saying that's not the case, it's not happening, because there's nothing going on. So how do these accounts suddenly know that Zidane's coming? Because he's ringing them up, telling them that it doesn't work that way. Okay, please don't be so stupid. It's going to be hard for me to get through this podcast without laughing all the way through, because it's just nonsense. So that's how they amass followers quickly, is because they send news out that you want to hear. You just want to hear it. You don't want to hear the negative. If someone came up to you and said, do you want the good news or the bad news? You'll go for the good news. You don't want to listen to the bad news. No one gives a damn about what the bad news is. So they play on it. And then you see them attacking journalists because it makes them look good, because they're not happy that journalists are saying something completely different with them. Journalists get paid to do this job. They're well connected. The media are filtered through the club to the journalists. They speak to agents on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I see accounts attacking Fabrizio constantly, but these are just random accounts that sit behind an AV and don't, and claim that they know something that Fabrizio doesn't. I don't claim that I know something that Fabrizio doesn't. I now and again get the information. I only go by what's told, and nothing is ever gospel. But these guys constantly attack journalists because it suits them, right? It makes them look like, well, we know and you don't know. But they don't get paid to do it. These are just random people that are going to different jobs on a day. They've probably got normal jobs, and they just want to do something that makes them seem better. And that is the truth that it comes down to. It might be harsh for people to hear this, but that is the truth, right? And that's how they amass. They amass followers because they only give you news that you want to hear. And they're clever at it. And some are more, some are just completely stupid at it. And some are just are quite canny with what they're doing. Or they'll throw in stuff like, I'm a Manchester United fan. Or, oh, these are the tactics. They'll throw different tweets in, right? So that makes you sort of like engage with them more. So it forgets about the stuff they've done. I saw someone post, I think it was on the 25th of October, where they said Ollie was leaving his desk. Well, where are we now? We're the 15th of November, so it must have been a long time to clear a desk. So, it's just that tweet alone, it just shows you the utter nonsense that these guys do, and you constantly falling for it. And it is extremely frustrating for me because I get painted under the same bracket as these idiots. And I'm having to constantly tell people that's not the case. And I don't care about myself in that sense because, I'm fine and I know what I'm doing and everything goes fine with me. But I don't want United fans to be going down the garden path every year and getting frustrated with it. And people don't learn. I've got followers that follow ITK accounts. They call some of the ITK frauds and then they back some others. And then a year later, they say, oh, well, they're frauds. Like, have you not learned from the amount of people that you're following, the news that comes out? And that's why they amass followers. And this is going to be a rant through the day because I'm just trying to get through it as much as I can. They will only give you positive news. The only time they give you negative news is if they're arguing with a journalist because it makes them look cool, right? And they'll say some nonsense about why journalists don't release information before them. Yeah, because it's not accurate. They only release information when it's valid. But they're not going to be like those ITK accounts that will say, or Zidane or Rodgers is coming in, but he's coming in a week, or he's coming in 4 months' time. But you're not going to suddenly have Ollie sitting there or a manager saying, oh, Zidane's coming in 4 months' time. Why should I stay in the job? Just think about what they're saying to you. They're not Mystic Meg. They don't know. They're just sending something out there because it looks cool. And then they start to backtrack and say, yeah, well, he's still Ollie in the club, or they know that this is going to happen. Well, if they know this is going to happen, they're not going to brief it out to millions of sources so you guys know. They'd keep it quiet. It's just nonsense. That's why they amass followers, because they don't give you negative news. They just give you positive news because you want to do it. And then some people look at Sky Bet. Some ITKs will look at Sky Bet and they'll look at the odds and they'll predict transfers on that, because you can predict transfers from them, because there's a lot of corruption and underhanded bets that go on about players so people can make money of it. Then it's obvious to do that. I've seen, you could look at Sky Bet. You could probably make an ITK account now and you'd get 80 to 70% things right just on Sky Bet or odds. You'd get it right on that. And it's just nonsense. I saw an account, I think it was vintage_United, he's quite a big Manchester United account, said he made an ITK account up and he got most things right. And this is just a normal guy. So of course these people are going to get things right. Of course, it doesn't mean they've got sources. I can predict the Man United score next weekend and I'm right about it. Oh, suddenly I'm a guru and scores. Like, come on, guys. Like, please, honestly, you need to just wake up. They just want to give you positive news, and that's it. It's extremely frustrating. It is frustrating for me to see. Right? Then the next thing is how do they manipulate people in tweets? Well, they'll what they do in tweets is they'll either say it might or it might not happen, and I did an experiment on that to see what happened, and people would believe it. And as I said, there's multiple things that's been leading up for me to do this podcast so I can see if this happens, right? And they will say it might or might not happen, or it's going to happen in the future. Don't worry. The day's a day, the usual crap. Oh, yes, he's going to get sacked. It's just a matter of time. Or he's resigned. Zidane's coming in 4 months' time. Yes. They're manipulated, so they've got time on their hands. You've got to wake up. If Zidane was going to Manchester United, or I'm just using this as examples, not for a specific idea, because a lot of accounts are mentioning Zidane, so I'm using it as a life example. If Zidane was coming to Manchester United, there would already be official talks, and then we would be briefed. Not to Zidane's sitting somewhere on his holiday, drinking God knows what, relaxing, and he's had no talks with United, and somehow an account on Twitter that's either got between 3 to 10K followers knows Zidane's coming to United in 4 months' time. And Zidane probably doesn't know himself. So they're manipulating you constantly, and they're manipulating Manchester United fans because Man United fans are in such a mess right now because Solskjaer is not performing. The Glazers are not good owners. The club structure is messy. So they're holding on hope that these accounts will be correct. And somehow they found something to help them. And that's the truth to the matter is. You need to wake up, smell the coffee, and block those motherfuckers because they're absolutely pointless. I'm sorry for swearing, but very frustrating. All right? And that's how they manipulate you. Why do they pop up each year? Okay? It's probably the same people. So they'll either change their names or they will completely make a new account and sit quietly for the year. And I'll mention something else in a minute around that. So they'll pop up each year. So suddenly a random account's popped up and they suddenly have sources. Well, where have you been for the last 5 to 6 years? How have you suddenly got sources? You joined Twitter in 2021. So you've suddenly seen people doing it. Right. So let me explain something. When one person does something, let's say in an investment, let's say I go and invest in crypto or invest in some stocks, right? That's making money, and then you translate that for Twitter. The first ITK is getting followers and interactions. So the next person says, actually, well, I want to invest. I want to do the same as an ITK. So I'm going to get followers and interactions. So it works as a domino effect, and it goes all the way down when there's multiple accounts that happen. And that's why they pop up each year, because it's a trend. They don't have any sources. There's no news around it. It's just that it starts from somewhere because it's become popular. And it's like everyone follows something that's popular and say, actually, I can do that. You look at YouTube, loads of people do fan cams because it's popular. So not necessarily have the idea, but they've gone through like that. So that's what you have to notice why they pop up each year. But they've got no sources or anything like that. It's just that they can manipulate it, as I've just previously said in the reasons why on this podcast. All right. Then the next thing is, if something doesn't go their way, they'll sit quietly for the 24 to 40 hours or a little bit longer. They might go away for a few days, these ITK accounts, and say, well, we're back now. So why do they do that? So people can forget, because people have a short-term memory on Twitter because social media comes thick and fast. There's so much news that happens every hour, every minute of the day that you suddenly forget. They'll either quietly change their name or, they'll delete their tweets while you're not looking. There's loads, and I see it all. And there's loads of them that do that. And then they'll pop up a few days later or in the transfer window, and they'll gain another 2,000 or 3,000 followers, and then they'll hibernate again. And you'll see it if you open your eyes and you realize what's going on, you watch the trend, then you'll say, my God, Chris is right. Right? You will, and I promise you, if you listen to me, you will not go. You won't go wrong with it at all. So watch them. They'll go quiet for 24, 40 hours. If Fabrizio, there's two things. If Fabrizio or some journalist, David Ornstein or anyone like that, comes out and says, Man United are not looking at Zidane or they're not looking at Rodgers, those accounts will either deactivate, making another account next year, like I've said, or they'll sit quietly, or they'll attack the journalists because they're saying, oh, they're just because of the pay money and stuff like that. Absolute nonsense from them. They know what they're talking about. So, yeah. So that is why they do it. Watch it, you'll see. Yeah. And this is the reasons why they don't exist. And I've explained the reasons why they don't exist, is that Man United do not need 50 or 60 ITKs flying in and around Twitter to be briefed. It's nonsense. So I'm afraid you're all getting fooled and you need to stop following these accounts, right? Why don't we see it from other clubs? Well, Liverpool, let's say Liverpool, they handle their transfer business extremely well. Or Spurs, Newcastle. But I guarantee Newcastle, because of the popularity, we're going to see a Newcastle in the know. Someone will listen to this podcast and say, that's a good idea, Chris, I'm going to create one. Of course they will. And then there'll be 20k people following them because they will be big on Twitter. And for some reason, that's what it is. So I'm telling you, right? And I'm not naming ITKs. None of them have information based on what I've said. And this has been extremely short today, but I wanted to get it off. Excuse me. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is that please don't tag me into ITK accounts. I'm not going to talk to them or get into a debate with them. If an ITK wants to discuss to me about the podcast I've made today or some of the issues they have with me, some of the reasons I've gone, then come and chat to me on the podcast. I'm not going to start tweeting left, right, and center and getting into debate because it gets lost in translation. And I've offered this in the past, right? I've offered many ITK accounts to come onto my podcast. I will sign a non-disclosure agreement if they wanted to do it just privately with me, and they refused. And that tells you something. Like, I don't care. I will be as real as possible. I will say whatever they want. And eventually, you're going to see different sides to me anyway. And I'm going to open you up into the life of whatever the stuff I do. Because I don't care. But these accounts, I've had many. I've had 3 or 4 where I've gone to. I'm not going to name names because of professional reasons. That have refused to come on a podcast. And their excuses is, what do I gain out of it? Well, what are you gaining out of being an ITK? What do you gain out of that? You're scared first to listen. What, have you got a mouse voice? Are you scared that you're a child or you're a kid, or what are you? What are you as a person? Or am I going to ask you questions that you can't answer? And I've done this with many, and they refuse. And if they're refusing me, then it's clear, if I ask a journalist to come on, they'll say yes. They wouldn't have a problem with that. If I go and pay them $5,000 for a journalist, I go and pay Fabrizio $5,000 to come on, he'll come on. If I said to the ITK, I'll give you $1,000, they still refuse. And I've done this before, and I've got proof of that as well, by the way. But I just don't like the stuff that goes on Twitter. But I will say this, is that I don't confirm news for ITKs. Like, if you're asking me to confirm news, it's like, don't. And also, don't paint me under the same bracket, because it's extremely frustrating, because I'm telling you that ITKs don't exist and people still don't listen because people are clueless and they want to listen to positive news. So it's entirely, at the end of the day, you don't have to listen to me, right? But it's entirely your opinion of what you want to do. You can go and listen to them. You can go and defend them as much as you want, and you can go and be a robot to those accounts. You can be a complete idiot. That's up to you. But what I'm saying to you, and I'm telling you the reasons why, I've just told you them, so make sure you listen to each one. I know I've ranted a little bit, but it's very difficult to deal with something that's fake. So you just need to make sure in the future and make sure that you just stick to mainstream media. And I tell people this is I give negative or positive news or transparent news. I won't ever lead you down the garden path. And I always tell people, stick to the journalists. I always tell people to stick to journalists or stick to people that actually get paid, or, you know, the clubs have those connections with the agents have the connections with the journalists. And that's how leaks and sources work. You know, they're not suddenly have an employee that suddenly leaks stuff, because he would be fired and they would know where it's coming from as well. You know, they're very clever and smart with how they deal with their PR and media relations. So just bear that in mind when you're dealing with news, right? So for instance, Fabrizio said that Solskjaer's staying. I've said Solskjaer's staying. That's the current situation. But yeah, people still think that someone's going to walk through the door tonight. You know, it's complete and utter nonsense. Anyway, guys, it's really brief today because I'm going to do a few more different podcasts this week around Manchester United, the shares things, because someone's asked me about the shares thing, so I'll do that. Twitter questions as well. I'll answer those as possible as I can. And then obviously post-match reaction, Manchester United, Watford, who should win, by the way. But yeah, thanks for listening to me. It's a little bit of a rant, but it hopefully gives you an understanding of why it's clear and why I wanted to do this. My thoughts around Itk'S and give you that understanding that it's fake. But I appreciate you two guys today. If you want to subscribe to my YouTube, that's up to you. If you want to jump into our Discord and rant or talk about Manchester United, please do, or any other club. It doesn't have to be Manchester United. If you want to follow us on Twitter for our opinions and views and God knows what else, transfer news, then do. Again, it's up to you. But thank you guys for listening. Hopefully have a good week. And let's see what Manchester United do the weekend. Now that Ollie is currently still the Manchester United manager, which ITK is going to play on that as well. So, and keep your hopes up through the week. And you'll see it, because I don't even have to say it. You'll see what they do for the week anyway. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Take care.